All right, fine, Bill. I'll build a robot. For those new to Big Bot Bash, we're gonna roll a D20 die to get prompts for different parts of a robot, and then we're gonna design our own based on those things. I'll link the paper that Bill made with all the prompts in the description for anybody that would like to build their own bots. If you design your own bot, please tag me in it so that I can see it and tag it with Big Bot Bash. So let's get rolling. Starting with the body. All right, we got a 5, which means brick. We're already off to a somewhat challenging start here, but let's roll for the head. 17, hot. All right, brick body, hot head. Now let's roll for the arms. 15, long and thin. You know I love a long and spindly build. Now hands. 14, two-handed. All right, rolling for legs. 15, bones. Brick body, bone legs. This might end up being a bit of a monstrosity, but maybe the flavor will save us. 6, savage. All right, so we've got a brick-bodied, hot-headed, long and thin-armed, two-handed, bone-legged, savage robot. So my first thought was to build a furnace bot, which I dubbed the burner bot. I really liked a lot of this design. It's kind of just a furnace in the center with a lot of different pipes coming out of it, but I just wasn't feeling the passion enough. So I went back to the drawing board and came up with the can't hold a candle to it bot. It had candle in it, so that's probably about the extent of my thought process there. It's essentially a robot made from a candlestick. We're really building this with a whole story around it, so I'll be talking you through all of those thoughts as we get to them in the build. Now, like a lot of builds, one of the first things I needed to figure out was lights. I had 3 different kinds of tea lights, and I chose the brightest one to be the flame for our candle. And that kind of decided the whole scale of the project. This project was super fitting because our Patreon project challenge for February and March was junk. To build the base, I am starting with a cup of applesauce. I'm cutting a hole in it to be what I have dubbed the match hatch. It's gonna have a little door to swing open and closed. You all know that I love useless, over-engineered mechanical pieces that you don't see much of in the end. For the main wax catching area of the candlestick, I am using a plastic lid. I think it's from some soup. I'm sanding the surface of that and then sticking them together with some E6000. It's really important to sand plastic pieces because it gives a better surface for the glue to stick to, so you won't end up having pieces falling apart later on. To build up the holder for the candlestick, I'm starting with a little loop from a tape dispenser, and then I'm adding this kind of curved piece on top that's a little bit more decorative, which I can't believe I'm saying considering I'm pretty sure it's from a deodorant. You won't see the inside of this, so at the bottom I'm just going to stick a bunch of hot glue in there so that it stays together really well. Beautiful. To cover the edge of the soup lid so it doesn't look as much like a soup lid, I am using this stripping. I honestly don't really remember what it's from. I don't know, some kind of wire. Then I'm using a piece of this broken wire on the underside. Then I'm going to sand the top of that in the middle so that I can attach the candle holder. The last piece on top of that is an actual candle holder from a tea light. It's gonna be a lot bigger than I expected. Oh no, why does this always happen to me? Go big or go home, I guess. I'm kind of feeling like I'd rather go home right now, but most old candlestick holders have a little ring that you can hold it from. I have a bunch of these plastic football rings that have been on top of cupcakes. I don't remember what I used the top of this for. I'm gonna try and just break it. I should probably put goggles. Nobody wants a shard of plastic in their eyes. Now, my thought here was that the candlestick bot would not want to be picked up, so it probably would have kind of broken this off so that it was harder to grab. I also thought that it being broken would add to the savage flavor. So savage. On the very bottom of the bot, I wanted there to be a little inlaid piece. So I'm taking the top from a paint tube lid and I'm just adding it down on the bottom to add a little bit of dimension. There is a seam where I added the wire casing around the edge of the lid. So of course I wanted to cover that. I don't think there will ever be a project that I don't use pizza boxes. I'm basically adding paperboard strips all around the circumference. Under that, there was a really rough cutoff, and I'm using some thick yarn that looks kind of like rope around the edge. To cover that up, I'm sanding everything to give it a really nice texture for me to paint on top of, and then going in with a coat of brown as a base. After I had done one coat just with a brush, I'm going in with a sponge to really get that brown thick in on there over the plastic. Then we are finally starting on some of our prompts. I'm using some paperboard from a cracker box to make bricks. It's a lot easier if I paint these before cutting them out, so I just kind of painted on a bunch of different red colors onto the paperboard, and then I'll cut that into strips and then individual bricks that I can lay onto the bottom applesauce container area. In my last Spirited Away food stall miniature, you know I was so excited about doing some tiny grouting of tiles. So I'm essentially using the same technique this time with the brick. I do it once in a video and now I just can't stop. Mini grouting, not even once, folks. I'm mixing up some plaster of Paris and just laying it in between all the bricks. Now, because I am working with paper this time, I did have to go in and bring the colors out a little bit more because a lot of that plaster kind of absorbs into the paper. But overall, I do think that this was a really cool method of doing bricks. For the match hatch, there has to be a little door that can open and close, and that is the piece that I cut out from the container. This did not turn out how I wanted it to. This would be a crisis because, you know, this was the one piece. But not to worry, I found an easy solution to our problem and I just ate another thing of applesauce. So I cut that, and then, as with all of the plastic in this project, I sanded it and painted brown on top for a base. After all of our pieces were primed with the base brown color, I'm going to mix some gold and brown, and then we'll really lightly paint that over top the brown, basically just dry brushing. We're really going for a nice old-fashioned brass finish. To add some little rivet details, I am using some rhinestones that I got for the Howl's Moving Castle bedroom miniature a while ago. I was really lucky that they were a really great size for this scale. I'm peppering these throughout the candlestick to add some detail to any part of the project that looked quite bare. This is very mystical and magical. The match hatch door is getting attached, ooh, got a little tongue twister there, with my mini hinges, also from the Howl's Moving Castle project, and that is getting bedazzled as well. I wanted to put some detail on the inside of the main body that the hatch opens to, so it's not just an empty void in there. So I pulled out my box of beads and just picked out some that I thought would work really well to create some inner machinery. I'm also going to be using some different sizes of straws for this to be almost like piping. Now, none of this is accurate to anything. I'm really just putting together some shapes that look vaguely machine-like, and then adding the same brass paint job that you will be seeing all throughout this project. The rhinestones were very fabulous, but they didn't quite fit our old-fashioned look that we're going for. So although we are covering them with a brass paint job, we all know the fun is under there. When designing this bot, one of the things I was thinking about is what this bot's weaknesses would be and how it would try to counteract that. I thought the biggest problem would probably be the flame burning out, so I figured it would need a way to relight its head. That means we need some matches, and thus the match hatch was born. And I definitely could have just cut down some actual matches to fit inside, but I don't want to waste good matches, so we are going to make our lives much harder as per usual. So I'm taking some used matches and adding a faux head to it with pieces of cotton ball and glue, and then painting them. I will admit I did make them a little bit large, but these get glued in on the back of the door for easy access, and a strip of tissue paper holds them in there to be pulled out. Now, we can't have matches and nothing to light them with. So on the outside of the bot, I thought it would be really cool to have an igniting surface like on a matchbook. This textured packing material was just absolutely perfect for this. Don't you just love when that happens? I just painted in the diamonds to simulate the texture and cut it to size, and then we can finally move on to the candle. The cardboard tube that I'm going to be using for the main candlestick was just a little bit too tall, so I did cut it down to size. I wanted to smooth the surface out first because the cardboard tube that I went with did have seams in it, so I'm covering the outside with a flour and water paper mache mixture, waiting for that to dry, and then sanding it as smooth as I can and painting it an off-white to seal it. Then we are to the hardest part of the project. So I had this idea that the dripping wax would create kind of a torso shape, or at least the suggestion of one. Now, as with most things in this build, this is mainly just to look cool. It's not particularly realistic, but listen, what fun is there if we can't take creative liberties? So to create the wax, I'm going to use hot glue, but getting that kind of gravity-defying shape is kind of the hard part here. To do this, I am going to cut strips of wax paper and form them into a rounded shape to be almost like a removable armature for the hot glue to form on. Now, since I was heating up the hot glue gun for this, I thought I would add the igniting surface to the body before starting to shape our candle wax. For the bottom part, I am holding the base upside down and just going in and trying to create wax-like drips and letting it kind of flow down with gravity. I added a little bit more hot glue at the very end. Once those drip shapes had formed, I could turn it right side up and attach those to the base with another layer of hot glue at the bottom. Then we just need to remove the wax paper. And this is when I found out that wax paper maybe was not the best choice for this. In the past, I actually have used wax paper with hot glue and it didn't really stick very well to it. But of course, this time, it did. Although it did end up working out, I would recommend using sticker paper instead. I'm saying this like any of you are actually gonna build this. Then we need to stick the candle in its place of honor and continue the wax strips. The top of the candle was especially difficult because I needed to make it so that the tea light part could be removable to access the switch to turn it on. This time I used sticker paper backing to create a similar shape that will let the hot glue kind of cascade and create a fanned out kind of waterfall shape in the same way that I did on the bottom. Then we just have to remove the paper underneath, which was significantly easier the second time.
I've got to be honest with you, I'm not feeling great about this right now. I think it's mainly this part. I wish I could blend it better.
Throughout this whole project, I kept telling myself that if something looked messy, it added to the savage flavor, but I still was not feeling very good about it. So I tried to fix some of the shapes with a blow dryer, but that didn't go super well. So I figured, let me work on something different for a little while. So we're gonna jump to the base. I'm making a base from the lid from my recent Spirited Away cookie tin. So we're just gonna sand it and then paint it brown. Then I wanted to make kind of a wood texture. So I'm laying some thin strips of cardstock to be like wood planks.
Maybe I just need to like clean my workspace up or something because it's a mess and I'm feeling terrible.
And then painting that to look like wood with lots of dry brushing. I like to utilize the brown color of the paperboard as an additional color, and then we'll go in at the end with matte Mod Podge to seal that off. Now, let's try to save this wax. I think really it just wasn't blending well enough for me like wax usually does. So I called in my MVP, the paper mache liquid, to fill in a lot of the gaps and just make everything cleaner and more cohesive. And when I tell you, this made all the difference.
The answer really always is paper mache.
In line with thinking of things that could potentially be problematic for a candle bot, I thought, what is more threatening to a candle than a candle snuffer? So of course, our bot has commandeered a snuffer to fight back with. And what else would we make a candle snuffer out of than a used up deodorant?
We're gonna need a power tool to get through the power stick. Just so you know, I am wearing safety glasses for this.
Are you seeing the vision yet? The bottom of the snuffer is going to be made from this plastic ice cream cone cover. Not gonna lie, I don't feel like we need to cover our ice cream cones in plastic, but what can I say? It's gonna help me build a candle snuffer. So I'm cutting the excess material from this and just leaving us with the good stuff and then gluing those pieces together. Now the top deodorant piece had some holes, so I put tissue paper on the inside and then I'm just filling it with, surprise, paper mache mixture. This actually came together way better than I expected. You might be thinking, what is savage about all of this? But listen, I added an absolutely vicious crack in the snuffer. This candle has been fighting, okay? The last step to the snuffer is to add the handle, and then I did a base brown coat. For final decoration, I'm adding some detail with some various beads, and then, say it with me, painting everything with a brass finish. I was thinking about what would be particularly savage for a candlebot to do. Burning all of your most important documents. I'm using some of my scraps of tea-dyed paper from all of the letters that I do. We're gonna create some burnt paper by, well, actually burning it. Listen, if there are any arsonists at home getting ideas, don't. My most important documents are, of course, a list of all the wonderful people helping support this channel on Patreon. I always think it's super fun when I can find a way to really include you all in a project. I am using chalk pastel to add more color to the burnt areas, and also some ash using the black chalk pastel, which I really do think added a lot. While I was at it, I thought I would also add some weathering to the snuffer and other parts of the piece, and I'm using the more rusty color to add some shading and dimension onto the candle. I also use this to give a bit of a burnt look to the wood on the base. Then we needed to make some long and thin arms with 2 hands. So the arms were made from a skewer, and then I'm wrapping thin jewelry wire around the end of it and covering the top with a bead. Then I just formed the wire into a hand shape, essentially creating a little armature. This is really nice because I can then form the hand into whatever shape that I want. I'm gonna cover the wire with some tiny beads to make finger joints. This was actually so much fun and maybe one of my favorite parts of the project. They were so satisfying to see come together. The tiny little details like this are always my favorite. I wanted to use some slightly curved plastic for the palm of the hands, so I cut them from another ice cream topper and then just laid it on top. The final detail on the hands is adding some super tiny rivets with puppy paint. I really just have to dot it on and then wait for it to dry. I love doing rivets like this because it's so easy. We're doing our signature brass paint job. What good hands to pet you with, my boy. I'm not sure what it is about tiny hands, but they're just too much fun. Then I could do weathering with the black chalk pastel and a darker brown acrylic wash, and finally bringing those rivet details out with gold. Then we had to attach the arms. Now, this was a struggle. I was trying to hold the pieces to be able to position them in the right pose with the snuffer. I was just really wishing I was Kamaji because I needed about 4 more hands.
Well, they're on there.
Over the joints that I hot glued everything together, I am putting some beads to clean it up and look like little cogs and just painting those to match. I admit, on the legs, I am taking some interpretive liberties here. I'm not gonna lie, every leg that I could think of that looked like actual bones just looked completely ridiculous. I'm going to interpret this as bare bones legs. Is this cheating? You decide. So I'm making the base of the foot from 2 tops of soap dispensers. These weren't quite the shape that I wanted them to be, so I did thin them out a little around the sides. And then I'm gluing some heels onto the back that are made from the tube of the soap bottle pump, and then adding a bead on the top that I can lay the rest of the leg into, which are going to be made from the same skewers as the arms. And then I'm adding some other little details, some beads at the joints, a paperboard panel on top of the foot because it was looking just a little bit too empty. I ended up adding a sort of extra back support, a bit like a portal long fall boot. To make the flame a little bit nicer when lit, I am covering the top of the tea light with polyfill to give it more of a flame-like shape. So to do this, I'm just using some glue and forming it into the shape. Then to prepare the base, I'm gluing on the papers, of course, along with some burnt matches that perhaps the candle's been starting fires with. The legs are going to be attached while the bot is suspended because I think it's too top heavy, but hopefully that means we can get a super extra dynamic pose with this. I completely forgot to add this until the last minute, so I just threw together a wind-up crank from some paperboard, a skewer, and a milk bottle tab, and of course I made it so it could turn. The spinning is always necessary. So I present to you the Can't Hold a Candle to It bot. This was so much fun. I don't know if I maybe failed a little on the savage front and maybe also the bone leg front, but listen. And I'm so excited to be participating with so many other super talented creators. A bunch of my favorite channels participated and a bunch of channels that are new to me as well that we can discover together. So please check out the playlist of all of the other bots if you haven't seen it yet. You could have videos to watch for the whole month, and I feel super honored to have been invited. So thank you so much to Bill making stuff, of course. There's gonna be a whole mess of things over on Patreon in the bonus video, talking about behind the scenes of this, of course, because these final shots were actually kind of hilarious to film. And also there will be some behind the scenes from me making all of the postcards, so if you're interested in that, that will be over there.